This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1.
Part 1.
Exam practice. Listening. You'll hear a woman calling Laverton Arts Centre for some information. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Laverton Arts Centre. How can I help you?
Hello. I've been to the Arts Centre a few times recently, and I understand you have this scheme for regular visitors.
The Friends of Laverton Arts Centre. Yes, that's right.
I wonder if you could tell me a little about it. I mean, how much it costs and what benefits it offers, things like that.
Certainly. Well, first of all, the good news is that we've recently changed the scheme. It used to cost £15 a year, but now it's free. All you have to do is fill in an application form. You can either come to the Arts Centre and do that here, or you can go to our website and apply online.
And so what are the benefits of joining?
There are actually quite a few. As a friend of Laverton Arts Centre, you'll receive a newsletter every 3 months with information on all the forthcoming events.
That sounds useful.
You also get priority booking for shows and concerts in the main theatre.
Can you explain how that works exactly?
Yes. What that means is that when tickets go on sale, for the first 2 days they're only available to friends of the Arts Centre. So as long as you book early, you can make sure you get seats.
Great! Do you ever offer discounts to friends of the centre?
Under the old system, when you had to pay to be a member, we did. Under the new system, there won't be any discounts for shows in the main theatre or films at the Arts Cinema. Having said that, we will be offering some discounts to members for performances in the small theatre. There'll be information about this in each issue of the newsletter.
I suppose I can find that information online as well, can I?
Absolutely. Actually, we're redoing our website at the moment. Right now, there actually isn't a special section for Friends of the Arts Centre on the website. Once the site's been redesigned, there will be. You'll be able to put in your username and password and enter a special section just for you.
It sounds excellent. Are there any requirements, though? I mean, as a member, do I have to do anything?
Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention that. There are no formal requirements at all, though obviously we have this scheme to encourage people to attend events here regularly. So we ask that you attend at least 4 events a year, whatever they are, if you possibly can. Nobody's going to count, though, and it's totally up to you.
That sounds fair enough. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
While you're here, we're actually conducting a short survey of people who phone up the Arts Centre. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions? It'll only take a couple of minutes.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks a lot. So, how many times have you visited Laverton Arts Centre in the last 6 months?
Well, I've only lived in the area for the last 4 months, so not that many times. 3, I suppose. Yes, that's right.
Fine. And how did you first find out about the Arts Centre?
Let me think. Oh, yes, a friend invited me to a concert and I came with her.
Have you ever seen a film at the Arts Cinema here?
No, I haven't, to be honest. In fact, until you mentioned it earlier, I didn't realise you even had a cinema.
One more question. If we offered a free tour of the Arts Centre, including things such as going backstage to look at the dressing rooms, would you be interested in going on it?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think a tour like that would be very interesting. I'd even pay for it.
That's great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a guide giving instructions to a group of international students in Canada preparing for a whale watching trip. Before you hear the talk, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully to the first part of the talk and answer questions 11 to 16.
Hello, everyone. Glad to see so many happy faces on this wild and windy day. Are you all ready to go looking for whales? I'm Tony, and our other guide today is Dale. We'll be using these 2 rubber boats you see here, and our trip today will take 3 hours. In a few minutes, we'll be heading into part of the largest temperate rainforest of the Pacific Northwest. I'll show you our route on the map here. This is where we are now. We'll be leaving the sheltered bay and heading out across the mouth of the bay toward the open water. As you know, last night there were strong winds in the area, so we can't go out into the ocean as we had planned. Near the mouth, the water will be quite rough. That's where we are most likely to spot orcas, or killer whales as they are also called. After crossing the mouth of the bay, we'll enter the calmer, shallower waters. This is where you look for gray whales. Then we will continue up this narrow inlet close to the shore. You will have a great view of giant fir and cedar trees that have never been logged. Here is the place to watch for wildlife. You are likely to see bears along the shore and eagles in the sky overhead. Right at the back of the inlet here are the hot springs where we will be stopping for an hour. You can have a soothing soak in bubbling hot water before the return trip. I'll tell you a little bit about the whales now because with the noise of the wind and the engine, you won't be able to hear much out there. As we head out in the boat, we will probably see dolphins first. They are a gray color and quite small, 1 to 2 meters long. They will swim right beside the boat, racing along and sometimes jumping out of the water just ahead of us. They swim very fast, and they are playful and curious. They're really fun to watch. The next ones we'll see are orcas, or killer whales, which are actually members of the dolphin family. They are 7 to 8 meters long, very fast, and they have sharp teeth. Some stay in these waters all year round. We identify them by the distinctive black and white color. They feed mainly on salmon in these waters, but the orca diet can include seabirds, seals, dolphins, and other mammals. They can be fierce hunters, and this is why they are called killer whales. We should start watching for them as soon as we get out toward open water. We're likely to spot the orcas from a considerable distance. Watch for the black and white marking and mist spouting from the blowholes on top of their heads. Just outside the inlet is where we will probably see gray whales. The grays are migratory. They pass through here twice a year, moving from far in the north where they feed to the warm southern waters where they breed. You are very lucky today because several have been reported in the area. Unlike the orcas, grays are solitary, except when you see a mother with a calf. The gray whales are much longer and heavier than the orcas, 14 meters long and weighing up to 30 tons. The gray whales are filter feeders, gathering tiny ghost shrimp from the sand at the bottom. We recognize grays from their tail fins because each one is different. Once we find the whales, we'll come up as close as we can safely. We are allowed to approach the whales no closer than 50 meters. But that feels pretty close when you are in the presence of animals this big. You'll see mist coming out of the blowholes when they breathe out, and you'll hear a loud hiss. If we are downwind, we might even be able to smell them, a strong, fishy smell.
Before the talk continues, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now, as the talk continues, answer questions 17 to 20.
Now, for just a few words of caution. It will be quite bouncy out there, especially in the front of the boat. If you want a smoother ride, stay in the middle of the boat, close to the engine. Hold on to the ropes and keep an eye on any big waves. Be alert so you don't get thrown out of the boat. In case of an emergency, you are all wearing survival suits. They'll keep you warm and dry in or out of the water. They are bright orange for visibility. The water temperature is around 8 degrees. Without these suits, you would only last a few minutes in this cold water. With these suits, your survival time is increased dramatically. They will keep you upright in the water even if you can't swim. But we don't expect anybody to end up in the water, so don't worry. Now, are there any questions?
I'm afraid of getting seasick.
Right. I was just coming to that. If you think you might get seasick, take one of these patches and put it on your arm at the wrist, like this. It works on pressure points of the body and will relieve seasickness without the drowsiness you can get from pills. Are there any other questions? All right then, let's start loading up the boats. We leave in 5 minutes.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear a student talking to her tutor about a presentation. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 23. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 23.
Excuse me, Dr. Owen,
Oh, hello, Karen.
Have you got a few moments?
Yeah, sure. How can I help you?
Well, I've had difficulty finding data on the original question, and I was wondering if I could change my paper to Investment in Knowledge, comparing some European countries with the United States, and then with others throughout the world, including the OECD average. I found lots of data by way of graphs, etc.
Where did you get the data from?
From various sources, books and journals.
How are you going to present the material?
I am going to use the electronic whiteboard as suggested and do a blend of graphs, pictures, text and podcasts to illustrate my presentation.
It sounds very impressive.
Yes, let's hope the whiteboard works. But I'm also going to have a PowerPoint presentation for a backup, just to cover myself.
A backup is a good idea, but it's a lot of work doing everything twice.
It is, but at least I'll have experience of both. Before we talk about how to use the data I've selected, could you give me the names of a few websites I should look at for more specific background material? When you type in anything to do with knowledge, there are millions of sites listed.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 24 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 24 to 30.
Let's see. Oh, I'll print you off this list. There we go.
Right. Do I really need to study everything on these?
No, I suggest there are 5 or 6 you can look at. The one you have to go through is the IT department section on the university site, which is www.kmul.org. It has articles by all of us in the department and has links to useful information, so I think it is essential to look at this.
OK, I've already been on it, but I'll tick that one as a must-read.
And there's a site which is hosted by Pollock. It's investmentit.com. All you need to do is to skim the abstracts of the articles on the site. They'll give you a general idea about the effects of investment in knowledge.
Yes, that sounds good. It cuts out having to read everything. What about this one? knowledgejournal.com.
If I remember, it's not that useful. I would say that there are very few things that you need to read there. Then there's itknowledgereview.com. It's got loads of articles, but it's probably best just to read those that have come out in the last term or so.
Do you have to subscribe?
No, it's free from the university library. And another free journal online is itonline.com. I wouldn't say it's essential to read it, but it is beneficial. And so I think it is worth a look.
If you think it's useful, there is no harm in looking at it.
But nationalstatistics.com is worth looking at and trying out the links that it gives. I think these are probably enough to be getting on with.
I think so. There's another thing I want to ask about. How much material should I use in my presentation?
Avoid crowding the screen. If you have lots of information at one time, people will not be able to follow it and will just switch off.
That's worth remembering. I've been in lectures where there was too much detail on the screen and it was impossible to read quickly. But what about visuals? Do you think it's okay to mix visuals and text?
Visuals are very useful, but they must be relevant, or else people will get confused about what they mean and why they are there, and they won't pay attention to what you are saying. So be careful. From what I can see, you have the makings of a very good presentation.
Thank you.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. You will hear an extract from a talk about preventative medicine. Specifically, how students can look after their own health. Listen to what the speaker says and answer questions 32 to 40. First, you have some time to look at the questions. Now listen carefully and answer questions.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Pat Parker, and I'm here to talk to you about preventative medicine in its widest and most personal aspects. In other words, I'm here to tell you how the patient should wrest control of their health away from the practitioners of medicine and take charge of their own medical destiny. I want to talk about staying out of the hands of the doctor. When the patient takes responsibility for her or his own health, and let's decide the patient is male for now, men are in fact more at risk than women anyway, when the patient takes over his own health regime, he must decide what he wants to do. The first thing, of course, is to give up the demon nicotine. Smoking is the worst threat to health, and it's self-inflicted damage. I have colleagues who are reluctant to treat smokers. If you want to stay well, stay off tobacco and smoking in all its manifestations. Our department has recently completed a survey of men's health. We looked at men in different age groups and occupations, and we came up with a disturbing insight. Young men, particularly working-class men, are at considerable risk of premature death because of their lifestyle. As a group, they have high risk factors. They drink too much alcohol, they smoke more heavily than any other group, their diet is frequently heavy in saturated fats, and they don't get enough exercise. We then did a smaller survey in which we looked at environmental factors which affect health. I had privately expected to find air or water pollution to be the biggest hazards, and they must not be ignored. However, the effects of the sun emerged as a threat which people simply do not take sufficiently seriously. Please remember that too much sunlight can cause permanent damage. Given this information, and the self-destructive things which people, particularly young men, are doing to themselves, one could be excused for feeling very depressed. However, I believe that a well-funded education campaign will help us improve public health standards and will be particularly valuable for young men. I'm an optimist. I see things improving, but only if we work very hard. In the second part of the talk, I want to consider different things that you as students can do to improve your fitness. So now I'd like to issue a qualification to everything I say. People will still get sick, and they will still need doctors. This advice is just to reduce the incidence of sickness. It would be great if disease were preventable, but it's not. However, we have power. In the late 80s, the Surgeon General of the United States said that 53% of our illnesses could be avoided by healthy lifestyle choices. I now want to discuss these choices with you. You should try to make keeping fit fun. It's very hard to go out and do exercises by yourself. So it's wise to find a sport that you like and play it with other people. If you swim, you can consider scuba diving or snorkeling. If you jog, try to find a friend to go with. If you walk, choose pretty places to walk or have a reason for walking. Your exercise regime should be a pleasure, not a penance. The university is an excellent place to find other people who share sporting interests with you, and there are many sports teams you can join. This, unfortunately, raises the issue of sports injuries, and different sports have characteristic injuries. As well as accidental injuries, we find repetitive strain injuries occurring in sports where the same motion is frequently performed, like rowing and squash. The parallel in working life is repetitive strain injury which may be suffered by typists or other people who perform the same action hour after hour, day after day. In this context, therefore, the most important thing to remember before any sport is to warm up adequately. Do stretching exercises and aim at all times to increase your flexibility. Be gentle with yourself and allow time to prepare for the game you have chosen to play. Don't be fooled by the term warm-up, by the way. It's every bit as important to do your warm-up exercises on a hot day as on a cool one. I think one of the most sensible and exciting developments in the reduction of injury is the recognition that all sports can borrow from each other. Many sports programs are now encouraging players to use cross-training techniques. That is, to borrow training techniques from other sports. Boxers have been using cross-training for years, building up stamina by doing road work and weight training while honing their skills and reflexes. Other sports, which require a high level of eye-hand coordination, are following this trend. So, you see table tennis players running and jogging to improve their performance, and footballers doing flexibility exercises, which can help them control the ball better. All of these results are good, but the general sense of well-being is best, and is accessible to us all, from trained athletes to people who will never run 100 meters in less than 15 seconds. Good health is not only for those who will achieve athletic greatness.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.